This is a presentation from Winchester Academy.
Hello. Thanks for having me tonight. It is my pleasure to be here and talking about the roots of jazz from a rhythmic perspective. How many of you, when you have thought about jazz or studied a little bit about jazz, what are some of the how did jazz start in this country? Maybe let's put it like that. What have you heard, or what have you learned about with that? From the blues, yes, that's a good one. What else? That was primarily so the synthesis of European and African cultures. Yeah, that's another good one. Blues. Someone else had New Orleans. Yes. All are excellent answers and correct, I would say, in a wide variety of stuff. But it bewildered me, and I taught this class on a collegiate level for a number of jazz history course, I should be more clear, for a number of years, and making that connection from African music to jazz. We're gonna talk about that side of it. We'll leave the European stuff for a different talk on a different time. I could never see how that turned the corner into jazz music and music that I have studied for a long time on the drum set. So I want to play something for you. The first recording we're going to listen to is some music from Ghana. It's from the Ewe people, and I'm going to just say this up front. I'll probably say it numerous times as we go throughout. Europe obviously isn't a monolith of people or styles of music. Every bit as much that's true of African music. So we oftentimes refer to stuff as African music, but Africa is gigantic. Right? I know all of you realize this, but it took me a long time to realize that not only do we have West African music that's primarily influencing American music, or American jazz specifically for today, but you've got a variety of different peoples with their own separate cultures, their own separate drumming cultures, their own separate singing cultures, that all came to influence jazz music. And depending upon what colonial power was present, people from different parts of Africa went to different parts of the Western Hemisphere. So I just kind of want to say that up front too. So while we're going to very loosely say African music, I always feel it's an injustice just to label it as such because it is very specific. So this first recording, like I said, is from the Ewe people from Ghana, West Africa. And I just want you to listen to it and just give me your thoughts. When we won't listen to the whole thing, but we'll start it out.
Oviche, Bodemi Wagome, Bozo Haya, Muyo. Oviche, Bodemi Wagome, Bozo Haya.
So this proverb they're actually going to play on the lead drum in just a second.
Etena Samsoa, Muyo, Etena Samsoa, Muyo, Ukumo Sore Mamo Dirite. Oviche, Bodemi Wagome, Bozo Haya, Muyo.
The drummer in me just adores that. I am immediately attracted to it. But how do we get from that to Benny Goodman? Right? It's curious, right? So I'm just out of curiosity, what are some of your impressions of that or things that you noticed as you were listening to it? Yeah, please. Very, very rhythmic. Yes. Yeah. Good. Other observations? The drums talk. Yeah, fantastic. I'm glad you heard that. That's one of the things that again attracting me as a drummer first to that was just the sheer but there's appropriate times for you to speak on the instrument and appropriate times for you to listen on the instrument as well, which is a whole other thing that we can get to some other time. But I appreciate you noticing that. That's great. Yeah, please. I would, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't even know if an early form would be right. I think that's been happening in that culture for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. Yeah, good. You had your hand up, right? Complex rhythms. Yes, yes, yeah, very good. Yeah, please. Yes, yeah, very good. Yep, there was a wood sound. There was a stick essentially playing on the side of the drum. There was also a metal sound too, which is where we're going to get to right away. Yeah, please. No, no, no. Yeah, that's an ensemble, a drum ensemble. Yep, yeah. That particular one, there's 4 drummers and then a bell player and a rattle player. Yeah, yeah. It's a big group. Yeah. Okay. I was talking with folks earlier. I'm from Montana originally, and I'm not exaggerating. My dad owned a Western wear store when I was growing up, and so my prep for listening to African music wasn't great. I grew up on country and Western music, both types. So like listening to African music or musics from that place made my head swim for a really long time, and I love it. I was curious by it, but confused constantly by it. So I appreciate that. Yeah, syncopation for sure. And I would, just out of curiosity, how many of you have studied music somewhere in your past, whether it be piano or voice or maybe band or orchestra? Oh, fantastic. Okay, a lot of musicians in here. I love it. And when I remember like beginning band class or piano, your teacher would have you put your foot, and then the syncopation is, right? That will get you to be able to press play on the African music stuff, but other than that, you're kind of out. So we're going to explore some of that. Yes? Oh, okay. Yeah, excellent. What part of it reminded you of that? The whole drumming thing, yeah. Yeah, fantastic. I appreciate hearing that. Thank you. Yeah. It's from Ghana now, but the Ewe people, there are several different peoples in that region, but specifically now they're in Ghana. Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. So one of the sounds that we heard was this instrument, and I'm going to play that part that the percussionist on there was playing. Pretty cool bell, isn't it? Again, just as a drum nerd, I love this stuff. So what I want you to try, I'm going to play that exact same thing again. And there are multiple right answers to this. There are a few wrong ones too, but I won't point you out. I want you just to tap your foot where you think the beat is. So in other words, don't worry about tapping this rhythm, but if you were to move your body to that bell, where would that pulse be? And you can just be a toe. It doesn't need to be your whole body. Just in case. All right, so I'm going to start off with this. When I play on the low bell, that's the beginning of the rhythmic cycle. Good. How many of you, what beats did you come up with for that? Would someone say 6? I thought I heard. Yep, 6 is a good one. Now everyone's going to be, oh no, I don't want to. Go ahead and guess wrong. Believe, if I had, what's that? You didn't count, okay. But you were feeling a beat with it. Oh, fantastic. Good. Anybody else count with what your cycles were for that? 4 is a good answer, yep. If you count the beginning note again on it, okay, yep, 7 would be great with that, yep. Good. So this is what I again just adore about African music. We oftentimes are probably most familiar with European harmony. When we take band, orchestra, piano lessons, that is primarily what we're going to be studying, right? So we think about hearing harmonic tension that releases into the tonic of the whatever piece we're playing. So our ear feels that relaxation. In most African cultures, that is the exact same thing, but with rhythm. So I like to think of it as rhythmic harmony, which is kind of a different way to think about it. So with this particular part, we can feel this in a variety of ways. So I'm going to count several different ways to group this. I'm not going to change this bell part at all, but I am going to change my perspective on time with it. So we'll start with this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. So if you tap your foot to that, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. I can also do 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So, actually, let me ask this. Let's see if you're ready for a math quiz tonight. I told you it's going to be interactive, so you can't fall asleep. What do all of those numbers, 2, 3, 4, and 6, all have in common? There's a number that they have in common. 12, exactly. Yeah, they're all derivatives of 12. So we can sort of view that timeline from any perspective that we want to with that, with the rhythm. And that is one of the key, I think, elements that came over from many of the African cultures, is that we can, again, time-wise look at it from a variety of standpoints, so there's not just one. You know, most of us, if we're watching an orchestra, we can see the conductor conduct a 4 pattern, or if they switch to 3, we can see all that. For this, it's all organized by this bell. So the performers are listening to that and then adjusting their parts accordingly to that. Yeah, so this is the conductor. Hopefully this goes without saying, but when the Africans were forcibly brought over to this hemisphere, they couldn't bring anything, right? Nobody was packing an overnight bag or their notebook of music or their favorite piano book, nothing, right? I mean, it was all what was locked into their memories. Which is why those oral traditions are so important, is they just pass stuff down from generation to generation by that. So there was no notebooks. So when they came over to this hemisphere, you had limitations in terms of what they could perform, because most places that they were didn't allow them, not only because they didn't have their own instruments, but to perform or to have any kind of unifying time with their cultures. So I think that's probably the nicest way to put that. I mean, I think we all know how horrible that was for those people. But what remained were the concepts of it. So I'm going to call that the rhythmic theory of what's going on with it. So one of the mutations that started to happen when this came over, specifically in Cuba, we went from this. I'm going to take 2 notes out of that pattern only, and you'll see what this turns into. So here's that pattern. I'm going to feel it in 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So here's the first note out. Second note out. Everybody recognize that rhythm? Right? I know a cat named Way Out Willie. Dun, 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 right? So we've heard that rhythm a whole bunch. And it's called, anybody know what that rhythm is called? See, I told you it was a test today. The rhythm is called clave, which probably once you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, it's those 2 little wooden sticks too that you can hit together. The instrument and the rhythm are called clave. So the idea with that then too, with that clave rhythm, I'll play it all just on this high bell for right now. We have a tense side and the release side. Tense, release, or tension. So the time or the rhythm within that is you're constantly feeling this kind of rhythmic tension, and then there's a release, and it's happening super quick. So just because I want to see what happens in Wapaka, can we try this together? So what I'd like to do is I want this half of the room, we'll do the 3 side, and then this half of the room will do the 2 side. So I'll play it on the low bell over here. So we'll go 3, that's it. Yeah. Good. Uh-huh. Yeah. There you go. Tension and release. We got it rhythmically. So if we're listening to Cuban music, which is one of the ways that we're going to funnel some of this music up to America, that is a key component to it. So if you listen to Afro-Cuban music, it's always going to be based around this sense of clave. And the claves can change a little bit, but basically it's what we just heard. So I want to listen to the next recording. This is a type of music from Cuba called rumba. How many of you maybe have or had an organ in your living room that there was a rumba button and you pressed it? Yes, I grew up with that too in Montana. Not the same kind of rumba. Just so you know, this is going to be totally different. How rumba developed, in my mind, it's very similar to how jazz developed in this country. In Cuba, you couldn't express, again, mostly your rhythmic leanings, whatever that was, again, because people were concerned that you would have commonalities with other people and then there'd be problems, right? You wouldn't be subservient anymore. So what those initial slaves would do, essentially, would be to play while after they unloaded a boat, say, for instance, or waiting for another shipment of stuff to come in, they would turn the boxes over that they were just loaded with produce or whatever and start to play rhythms on that fell in with this. And in order for it to be acceptable within the country, they had to do it in Spanish. So what you're going to listen to next, you won't hear in Africa, although there's going to be stuff that kind of sounds like Africa in it. You won't hear it in Spain because the drumming style is way different. But let's just listen to a little bit of this. Right away, you'll hear that clave. Pops right out, doesn't it? So we haven't even gotten into the tune yet. They're just kind of setting it up, so all of the sounds are basically setting the tonality for what they're going to sing in. And it will go on, but everything that we heard with the African music is basically still happening in this, right? We have that sense of clave. We have the call and response, so the listening going back and forth. Again, it can get pretty dense, and if we have time, I'll maybe play some other stuff, but it can get pretty dense, but there's always a sense of listening, and there's always a sense of who's important at that time, if you will, which very much transfers over into American jazz. So that rhythm, I'll do it on this still. Right back to clave. Finds its way up to New Orleans. Any ideas as to why that connection would be made? I studied jazz histories for years before anyone mentioned Havana and New Orleans to me, or before I read it in a book. And it seems so common sense now that I'm surprised. But why? Well, yes, okay. Sugar was a big part of why Cuba was so prosperous. Spaniards were so prosperous through Cuba. It's also why they turned over so many Africans as well, too, because they just literally worked them to death. Yes, so in part that. Why else? Correct, yes. Two really busy port cities, both controlled for a vast percentage of time by Spaniards, right? So it would just make sense that that connection was there. It's a relatively short trip by boat. And you had musicians that were frequently going back and forth between Havana and New Orleans. Yeah. Yes, very important. And that island has been controlled for centuries because of its strategic placement. So again, a whole other part of the lecture we can go into, but yeah, fantastic. And Cuba, surprisingly, for how small that little island is, it very much like we were talking about with Africans and the different influences, there's very specific types of music that happen in ports of Cuba or cities in Cuba. I guess we could even say, in America, it's the same sort of thing. New York style jazz is different than what we might call New Orleans jazz or Dixieland jazz or West Coast jazz or Chicago jazz. I mean, they all have their different kind of spins on that. But so that clave comes up to New Orleans, and we get this. We start to hear this in a lot of the music. So if I'm walking time, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That rhythm is known as the habanera clave or habanera rhythm. Some people will call it New Orleans clave. So it's basically that 3-2 that we just heard, but just the 3 side of it, just the tension side of it. One of the earliest jazz performers, or one of the guys that's essentially credited with creating a lot of jazz. Of course, Louis Armstrong is the predominant one. We'll get to him in a little while here too. But it was a gentleman by the name of Jelly Roll Morton. Does that sound familiar? I know we got a lot of pianists in ragtime. He sort of transitioned out of a lot of ragtime music, stride piano, and then bled over into what a lot of people consider early jazz music. So I want to play a little bit of, this is a piece of Jelly Roll's called New Orleans Blues. Right, that rhythm we were just clapping. Yeah, you can hear that pretty clearly, right, in his piano playing. He called that the Spanish tinge. That was Jelly Roll's term for that rhythm. Jelly Roll claimed a lot of things. Probably most of them were true, but a lot of people were also like, okay. So we get that sense. What else did you notice in the way Jelly Roll played his rhythms in this particular recording? Oh, I should say Jelly Roll was born in 1890, just to give you a sense of when he came onto the scene. So the fact that he was already interacting with Cuban-influenced, again, I'll also say African-influenced music it happened a long time ago, right? And we can hear that in his playing. Let's just leave it there for a minute. So see, we hear that rhythm. Is there anything else that you notice about the feel with which he plays? Oh, and you got a question? Okay. Okay. So we've got some crisp rhythms. What else might you hear from this? Bass, yes, okay, we heard a lot of bass. What about the feel of his time? Yes. 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 So, oh yeah, please. Well, okay, I wasn't going to go there, but yeah. I like to go there as much as I can, but we're in the library, so yeah. It is very influenced by that. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah. Yes, there will be some fast stuff, but for sure that's part of it. And I like it. So it's got that swing to it. And I would say of music that comes from the African diaspora has that mostly. So any of the music, if we put a metronome on and we were good music students and we count 1E and 2E and 3, it's not going to fit very good. It's going to sound actually pretty bad over this when we get that feel that's kind of baked in with it. So what the drummers start to do coming out of that feel, we have a few things coming in to that as well. So I know all of you have heard this before. If we think of like a marching band type style, right, especially the early bands, you would also have a second bass drum player, usually holding it up, very much like if we're thinking parades or marching band. Generally just that if we're being pretty serious with it. By the way, this is, I don't know why I just thought of this. My dad said he was a drummer in high school. I don't know if he actually was, but anytime he would grab my sticks, he always goes, that same exact thing. So I always smile when I play it. Now, we might also have a third percussionist playing cymbals during that time too, and they typically would double that bass drummer, so. Or maybe something like that. Something like that. So what started happening in New Orleans too is the percussion section consolidated a little bit. So they would have somebody playing bass drum, and then they mounted a cymbal on top of it. So instead of just, just that part and putting the cymbal with it, which is pretty boring, I'm just going to say, if you're going to play that, they would start to spice it up a little bit. Or so which might sound something like this. Little more exciting, right? It's going to get better. So have any of you heard of Second Line by any chance from New Orleans? Yeah. What is it? Do you know? Say again? Yeah. Drum troupe, yeah. So it would be, it's typically associated drum line type thing. Yes, good. You know more about it? Know what it is? Okay, good. Yeah, please. Yes. Yeah. Well, the second line part would be at the wedding. So they would have parades that would go to the funerals and be basically what I just played, kind of that slow march. Or probably actually slower than that. And then there would be hymns being played by a brass band, typically, or whatever kind of instrumentation they could have. The second line part of it was like after the body was put to rest, then there would be the party. So it would typically get a lot faster. So I'll start slow. We can have our Spanish tinge coming in there with the bass drum part. Or something like this. So, Mardi Gras, right? Oh, you don't have to, please. It's joy enough for me to be able to do that in a library to begin. Yes, it's finally. So excited. So that's called second line feel, and we start to get that swing feeling that we just noticed Jelly Roll play with. Okay, so in the early recordings, I know I mentioned Jelly Roll was a transitional figure from ragtime, stride piano, I think we could say, to early jazz playing. One of the people that I think we associate most with that sort of inventing jazz, if you will, is Louis Armstrong, right? I know I said that before. Everyone's like, yes. So here is one of Louis's early pieces. And actually, I'll take one quick step back to when I think about Louis Armstrong, or when I first encountered the name Louis Armstrong, I thought Wonderful World, right? Any other associations that you guys have? West. Oh well. Okay. So you're far more advanced than I was when I first. But I thought, why is Wonderful World transformational to jazz music? I didn't understand it at all. Basically, where Louis was probably most influential on jazz music was the mid to late 20s with his groups called the Hot Fives or the Hot Sevens. So this is going to be one of those recordings. Or here's another one. This is called Strutting with Some Barbecue. So, first off, when you listen to these recordings, Louis is always going to sound better than everybody else. He just does, right? And it sounds more like jazz we're used to listening to because everybody started to phrase like Louis Armstrong after they heard him, because you have to. But with this early jazz music, you're going to frequently feel it, the music in two. So when you hear like the tuba part in it, the drummer might be playing something similar to this. Kind of a stripped down version of what I played before, in large part because when they recorded that, if the drummer played with much dynamics or much force, it would cause the needle on the recording device to skip, and it would wreck the whole recording. So you frequently don't hear like these full parts on these recordings. So let's listen to see if we can hear that two feel on there. 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. Did that make sense? You could hear sort of that two feel where usually you hear tuba maybe involved with that as well. When I would teach jazz history class, I would frequently ask the college students, what does that remind you of? And someone invariably would be like, old Mickey Mouse cartoons. Yeah, right? I mean, it's like Steamboat Willie or something, doing that. Yeah. Sure. Yes.
What is that?
Yes. Okay, great. I know exactly what you mean. Yes. In fact, why don't I play that so everybody can hear that? That's on the end of West End Blues, which I don't know if I have on this playlist. Nope, I don't. Sorry, I tried to keep it tight. So basically, drum set too, this was the other part of what I wanted to get into with this, is an American instrument. How many of you ever thought of it like that before? Anybody? Yeah, I didn't for years either, in part just because it's so ubiquitous, right? We grew up listening to the Beatles or whoever your favorite rock band is. You would always see a drum set, and it just seemed like guitar or bass, or, I never really honestly put that much thought into it. But the drum set, in addition to how it incorporates the rhythm that we're talking about, is, I would argue, the most American instrument that there is, because it is such a melting pot of ideas and cultures. So the bass and snare that we already talked about, European marching music, classical music, you frequently could see and hear that. The cymbals that we hear are from the Middle East. So Turkey, Istanbul is where they were made for centuries. And so those cymbals came over. I didn't bring any toms just so you could see, but the original toms were like Chinese tom-toms with heads tacked over the top of it. You would frequently see wood blocks and cowbells on the early drum sets as well. coming from all sorts of places. Cuba obviously would be one example of that. And specifically, the foot pedals, completely American invention. Nobody thought about doing that before. Some Americans like, hey, so if I play 4 drummers' parts, I get paid 4 times as much? I'm just assuming that that's what happened. That had to have been it. The other part that is strictly American too are this implement called the brushes. Probably some of you have seen these before. These are some of my favorite things to play, actually. I love playing brushes. They actually were fly swatters originally, and they are effective at that. But this is an American invention. And they played it on an American instrument, which I love all parts of that. It's just fascinating to me that we have a culture that the music developed around this instrument, and the instrument developed from, let me have some of that. Can I try some of that? Let's put some of this in. It's fascinating to hear. So, yeah, good. That two-feel, yeah, please. That's an American instrument. So to answer your question, what started out as what they called a lowboy initially. So it stood just like ankle height, and it would be 2 thicker metal, I'm going to say cymbals, but they almost sounded more like cups. And drummers would use that, and then as we get into the evolution, which I'll get there in 7 minutes. I don't know. But that's when that was raised up, and it starts to incorporate the rest of the language on that. So yes, an American instrument that wasn't initial to that, but as time came in, it grew out of that. But the cymbals themselves are Middle Eastern, Istanbul, Turkey area. Yeah, good question. Good, so we're in a two-feel. So there were, as dance music started to become a little bit more popular, they decided to switch, they being the bands, and the effects that it have from this 2-beat feel to something that's a little more danceable, so a 4-beat feel. And let me play. Oh, I love this example. Duke Ellington's band had a residency at the Cotton Club for years, right? Probably most of you would be like, yeah, that sounds about right. When he started out doing that, jazz as we know it in this formalized sense was not a thing yet. So his initial bands were show bands, essentially, and they would call it like jungle drums, or they would have dancers do these kind of exotic things. And some of the early 2-beat stuff, this is called East St. Louis Toodaloo, easy for me to say. You'll feel the 2-feel in this as well. This is 1927. 1, 2, 1, 2. We got that banjo. Cool though, right? Yeah, so this is East St. Louis Toodaloo, that trumpet style where it was kind of growling and everything. That was very much, trumpet players wanted to sound like Louis Armstrong as best they could, and that growling and that kind of sense of attitude, if you will, was one of those characteristics. So this next recording is 10 years later only. It's 1937. This is called the new East St. Louis Toodaloo. Now we're feeling it in the floor, right? You feel those four quarter notes from the bass? Still got the good trumpet. You still hear these kind of interesting percussion parts going on the top. All right. You can all feel that 4-feel, right? Does it start to sound a little bit more like big band music you might dance to? Yes, absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, please. Yeah, basically. I mean, it's a revamped version, certainly. Duke did all the stuff on it, but it's amazing, isn't it, the transformation? I mean, clearly he changed a bunch of stuff, but it's Canoe, you say. Yeah, which is fascinating. And boy, Duke's band, that would be a whole other thing we could talk about sometime that I just love. So the drumming style then that starts to change with that, and actually the whole rhythm section, instead of a tuba, typically that would play boom, 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 boom for that two feel, now generally gets replaced by a bass player playing all four of those quarter notes. So it gives it that kind of smooth feel. So the drummer has to adapt to that as well. So instead of, it starts to move to this in the bass drum. I still got that on the offbeats typically. Now, it's a little heavy, right? Sounds like the music my kids listen to. How old am I? I don't know. But you know, it's that heavy bass drum sound that just keeps going. So just sonically speaking, one of the things that drummers wanted to do was to play up on those higher overtones. So this, instead of being really low and thumpy with that bass drum, starts to come up here. Again. So it still kind of has that same propulsion of time and that sense of wanting to dance through there. So I would be remiss if I didn't play one of the big bands that did this best. I mean, Duke Ellington's band was fantastic with it, but Count Basie's band is probably one of the greats of all the dancing bands. Nolan, you said you saw Count Basie, right? And Louis Armstrong. Yeah. Yes, I am in awe of it. It's amazing. So speaking of the hi-hat then too, one of the things that the drummer for the Count Basie band did, instead of putting it all up here, he would go, which again is also probably a pretty familiar sound, right, if you've listened to big band music. So this is the Count Basie band. This is a song called Doggin' Around. Now, I'm just going to say real quickly, too, the rhythm section, you almost don't notice them, right? I mean, it's in the background, but it's keeping everything really moving forward so that one could dance to this. That hi-hat. You can hear that though, right? I mean, it's a pretty smooth transition into that. So from there, and we're going to kind of peel off from where the rhythm section really develops right now. You get hard bop, you get cool bop, you get bebop actually, which we didn't even get to yet. We're all just in the big band era right now, which really became popular about. Well, oftentimes historians credit 1936 when Benny Goodman was in Los Angeles at the Palomar Ballroom. But it was happening well before him with Count Basie's band and Duke Ellington's band, but there you go. So instead of getting into those styles from that rhythmic perspective, I want to take one other sort of sidestep with this. There's a rhythm that we hear pretty frequently, and I know you'll hear it once I play it, you'll recognize it. I'm going to go back to that beginning bell part that we started with, and then I'm going to start to take some notes out and then change them just a little bit. So 3, 4, 1, 2. If you want to tap along too, that would be great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Here's the first beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So that's in that original bell part. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And I'm going to add 2 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Here's the original. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Were you able to follow that? Okay. Okay. I mean this legitimately. I have been lost and confused in this music more times than I'd like to admit. And if I had a nickel for every time I've been lost, I tell people I would have a new Subaru for every day of the week because I would have that much money. But that rhythm that we just heard, you have all heard this, I know for sure. This is a shuffle rhythm that if you've listened to any early R&B especially, or blues music, jazz music, you'll hear this very frequently in it. So I'm going to play that with both hands. Here's the original. Yeah. So, in a jazz context,
A town in any clime where people like a swinging time. Stay awake both day and night till everybody's feeling good and right. Then throw me like a dab in the middle.
Yeah, Joe Williams, you can't beat it. And that shuffle rhythm, it just makes you feel good. Yeah, anytime I'm not feeling good, I'll put on a shuffle and be like, all right. Boy, we've heard about 5-pound bags. I think I've got enough stuff to put into it. I want to take one other jump way now in terms of some of that rhythmic perspective that we started with at the very beginning. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. All those different perspectives that we could have on that. Louis Armstrong was also one of the first guys to really start to do that in his soloing as well. So we're going to jump out of the rhythm section and just talk about strictly some very rhythmically interesting things. So again, this is, I think this recording was in 1927, if I remember. And what I want you to listen to, we'll get that started. We all know Louis as a trumpet player and as a singer, right, from Wonderful World. In fact, some people may just know him as a singer, if that's your first encounter. But here's the other part of why he was such an important, I'm going to just focus on the rhythm, a rhythmic contributor to jazz music, is he had such an evolved sense of not only feel, like we just sort of heard in those recordings, but also in terms of rhythmic development. So I'm going to play... actually, we're going to skip his trumpet solo, which is unfortunate because it's really good. But we're going to skip to a scat solo that he does on this. Yeah. Did any of you guys know that he's... Yeah, I didn't either. Yeah. If you've seen him, you know. But, I always just thought that he did melody. And I didn't realize that there was this scat singing component to it. So I'm going to start, and I don't mean this to be mean, but I'm going to start a little bit on the clarinet solo, which is good, but it's not great. Compared to Louis, I mean, it would be impossible. But let's fast forward a little bit here. So it's a little bit predictable and a little bit square, which is just fine because it was 1927. Good. Yeah, this next part is what I'm really looking for. That's also really cool. But so what did you notice in the middle of that solo? What he did with his voice? Yeah. It feels very random, doesn't it? Yes. So check out this rhythmic perspective. So I'm going to start a little bit before this part, and what I'd like for you to do is we'll tap that 2 together. So we'll get a sense of where those big beats are, and then we're going to listen to the rhythm that he puts over the top of that. So let me go back here. So tap your foot here if you would. Now we're going to keep this going. I'm going to tap the rhythm of what he plays coming up here next. There it is. And change it right there. I mean, that is like light years ahead of everything, you know? And so not only is he rhythmically changing that perspective, but he's also keeping track of the harmonic progression too, which was unbelievable. Yeah. Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think one could easily argue that there really wasn't a difference between his trumpet playing and his vocalizations. Yeah, it was just like how he expressed. So real quickly, I want to take questions too. I want to play one other quick thing where we'll hear this exact same thing. This is with the Chick Corea trio. Is anyone familiar with Chick? He actually just recently passed away. An amazing pianist, and the trio is Christian McBride on bass. If you're familiar with him, he's one of the greats. And this drummer named Brian Blade. Brian Blade does this exact same thing. This is 2015 in this next recording. So we'll go, I'll fast forward it there.
Thanks for coming out to hear the trio. Please welcome my magnificent musical partners, Brian Blade on the drums. Brian Blade. The great Christian McBride on the bass.
So Brian starts with brushes in this piece. I'll just kind of fast forward in here. A little bit free. Now it's going to move into some time here. My thumbs are too big for this little thing. All right, let's try again. So now our leads here, if you want to tap your foot to this. Now he's going to switch to sticks. And Chick joins in there too. Now, that sounds really cool. I could probably find 1,000 other versions of people doing something similar to that. But I just think it's that vocabulary that he used really on the beginnings of jazz. We're still using it today, and it still sounds amazing today, too. So.